The ascending tracts are basically carrying the information from the periphery towards the final centers in the brain, in the cerebral cortex, for instance. So basically, how is the information being carried? And it is not basically the job of a single neuron. We have different neurons at different levels that are being incorporated in the central nervous system, in the spinal cord. And we are basically going to divide them into three major categories depending upon their particular information that they're basically carrying and how they're basically incorporated in the central nervous system. First of all, for instance, the information is being carried from the lower limb and from the upper limb. And the information reaches, for instance, we're talking about the stimuli such as the fine touch and the vibratory sensations and the discriminative touch. And we know this is carried by the dorsal columns, namely the fasciculus gracilis and the fasciculus cuneatus, as you can see over here. So this neuron, which is basically carrying the information from the receptor organs towards that particular gray column and then finally enters, decussates, and then obviously enters into the white columns and the information starts to ascend. This is known as the first order neuron over here. And then after that, there is going to be a second order neuron, which is basically going to start off from that particular level in the spinal cord where the information is gathered around. And from here on, the information is taken up by another neuron, which is known as the second order neuron. And it is taking the information right from the spinal cord towards the thalamus, for instance. This is going to be known as the second order neuron over here. So it is going to pass along through the medulla oblongata, through the brainstem, pons, midbrain structures in between, and then it is going to reach the VPL nucleus or any other nucleus in the thalamus for the integrative purposes, of course. So it is not going to be quite simplified as we might think that the information is gathered by a neuron and is taken up to the higher centers of the brain just like that. It is not so. These three different categories of neurons that they're involved in the process of taking up information towards the higher centers of the brain. Thereon, from the thalamus, there is this association fibers. So when we discuss, when we would be discussing the cerebral cortex, we must know that there are some of the fibers which are basically incorporating the different structures inside the cerebral cortex towards the higher centers for the final destination. And these fibers would be known as the association fibers. Whenever there is going to be an antero-posterior association, they are going to be known as the association fibers. And there is one more association that you have to remember. It is known as the lateral to medial association, or even from right to left association. And these fibers are going to be known as mostly as the commissural fibers. So these two terminologies you have to remember because I'll be using them again and again in the explanation. We have the association fibers and we have the commissural fibers, and they're basically connecting the different areas of the brain in between. They're carrying information in between the cerebral cortex and the structures present in the cerebral cortex in between, for instance, midbrain, for instance, thalamus, for further integrative purposes. One of the examples of the commissural fibers, the biggest commissural fiber in the brain is the corpus callosum, which is basically connecting the two cerebral hemispheres. We all know that we have these two cerebral hemispheres, the right one and then we have the left one, and they're being interconnected by the fibers which are known as the corpus callosum. So for here, we know that the third order neuron, it is being connected through and is basically a connection between the thalamus and the cerebral cortex, and this is known as the corona radiata. This third order neuron or the third order neurons are known as the corona radiata, which are basically connecting the information or sending the information from the thalamus to the cerebral cortex over here. This is the thalamus and this is the higher centers of the brain, and the fibers that are basically connecting these two areas are known as the third order neurons. So mainly we have the first, then we move on to the second, and the information is passed on to the third order neuron, and then it finally reaches the final destination. This is a common pathway that is being followed by all of these tracts, all of the ascending tracts generally.